Welcome to the Early Childhood Chapters podcast. I'm Emily Garman. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce Keriann Wilmot, who is also known as the Toy Queen. Keriann is an occupational therapist with decades of experience working with children and an unmatched expertise in recommending toys that foster fine motor development. In this episode, we'll discuss her latest book, Fine Motor Foundations, Tools and Techniques for Tiny Hands, and dive into the importance of fine motor skills in the early years. We'll also explore how the shift towards screen-based play is impacting development, what this means for schools, and how parents and educators can support children through thoughtful play and activities. Whether you're a parent, teacher, or caregiver, this episode is packed with practical and valuable insights you won't want to miss. Before we get started, I wanted to make sure we're all on the same page when we're talking about fine motor skills. Can you give just a brief overview of what we're talking about when we say fine motor skills?
Yeah, when we talk about fine motor skills, we're really talking about kind of the smaller muscles, generally of the arm and the hand, where fingers need to move in a coordinated way in order to get everyday activities complete. So fine motor skills would be like using your hands to cut with a fork and knife, using both hands at the same time to tie your shoelaces, how you would hold a pencil in your hand before you're able to write. So generally the smaller muscles in the hand that allow us to do all those things we need to do to perform in everyday life.
And why is that so important in the very first years of life? Your book talks a lot about that time period between ages 0 to 3, and fine motor development is so critical then.
In terms of younger years when fine motor skills are really important, it's because that's when a lot of the strength actually develops. You know, when you have a little baby and a baby's playing on their tummy, I know a lot of people talk about tummy time and I think they look at it more for like head control, right? Oh, we need to do tummy time so they can lift their head and see what's going on in the world. And while that's a really big part of it, when a baby is lying on their belly, they're bearing a lot of weight. You know, they're resting on their elbows and on their forearms, right? And as they lift their head and they do that for longer periods of time, those muscles around those joints are contracting. And when they're contracting, they're actually building strength. And so that's what kids need as they develop into their later toddler and preschool and elementary years, is they need to have a good foundation of strength, generally in their core, which is in the middle part of their body, and in their arms, so that when we ask them to do these more intricate fine motor activities, they have the foundational skills for that. It's kind of unique how the human body develops, right? We develop from the middle of the body out to the fingertips. So you have to have a good solid base of strength before you can get the dexterity and the mobility in those places that are developed further away from the body.
One of the things you talk about a lot in the book and devote a lot of really clear pictures and examples of is pencil grip. So how we hold a pencil, how children hold a crayon or a marker. So for somebody who's inexperienced in this field like me, I think, what difference does it make how I hold my pencil? I'm holding a pencil, I can write. What's the big deal? So tell me about the focus on that and why that's such a critical thing that teachers want to look at and we want to make sure we're doing properly.
Yeah, for sure. You know, handwriting is really important. It's been interesting I've been an OT for 25 years and worked with kids primarily on handwriting and their fine motor skills for a really long time. And we've seen a lot of shift in society, right? Kids generally used to have a lot more time, especially in an early childhood setting, playing, and they were developing those skills through playing. And a lot of what we're seeing now, and the pencil grip is important, but I think at the end of the day, all of those fun fine motor activities and sensory things that kids do in daycare and preschool, those are the foundational prerequisite skills that they're going to develop when they need to actually hold that pencil and write. You know, it's a complicated skill, and a lot of times eventually as kids get older, like the perfect pencil grip, what we talk about is a tripod grasp, right? So it's having your thumb, your index, and your middle finger that come together while the other two fingers are flexed against the palm. So this is what we would call a tripod grasp pattern. So that shows that basically all of the muscles in the hand are developed to a point where it can stabilize that pencil and stay in that place while kids are copying letters and things like that. So as they get older and they need to write more letters, and then they need to take those letters and make phrases and then write into paragraphs and longer sentences, you need to have the skill developed to be able to have the endurance for the task in the long run. So if you're a younger kid, and it's totally appropriate for a 2-year-old to hold a pencil with their whole hand, that's totally fine. Over time, what you see is, again, like you go from a palmar grasp to like a pronated grip to maybe all the fingers on the pencil, and then now you're down to the 3 and the 2 flexed in here, right? There's a process of development over time and how that happens. It's totally fine at certain ages for kids to have a more immature, undeveloped pencil grip. The issue is when you have a second grader and they're coming in holding their pencil like that, there's no way that kind of grip is going to be able to support writing those letters and the space that they need to be written in and formed in a way that they're going to be legible.
So when we think about how much less kids are actually writing these days, maybe not in preschool, but as they get older, I mean, I know I write with my hand a lot less than I did 20 years ago, 30 years ago. We're typing, we're texting. So I've also read a big part of what Maria Montessori said was that information and knowledge, we learn things from the hand to the mind. So we're doing things with our hands. We're getting additional information through our hands and doing things kinetically in our bodies that we don't get just through a screen. So you probably have a lot to say about how screens have changed early childhood education and, of course, all of our lives. But I'm interested to see what you're seeing as a therapist, what this means for education, that we are bringing screens in so much earlier in education.
Yeah, a lot of there's pretty much 2 main things I think I could talk about to that effect. We're seeing screens like super early, right? You see 1-year-olds who know exactly how to tap an iPad and get through an app and essentially start to watch their videos and play. So kids are being exposed to screens at an earlier time frame. And they're also being exposed to them when their hand skills are not fully developed. So I often see a lot of kids that are using they're using their thumbs, right? Like when I use my tablet, I hold it in one hand and I use my index finger to kind of tap, swipe, and move. And you see a lot of these kids that are almost like they're using their tablets like video games. They're using like kind of like the wrong tool for the job. So they're not really using their hands the way that they were designed, and now they're kind of building these habits over time that make it harder to have, again, some of that more refinement. The other piece, and it's interesting, the writing hasn't necessarily gone away. What I've seen is that it's just being introduced so much sooner than it should be. And so instead of kids getting a pencil in their hand for the first time when they're 6, I've been in daycares when they got full pencils out on the table when the kids are 2 and 3. And I'm like, silently having a heart attack. I'm like, where are your crayons? So on the flip side, the writing's there, it's coming in younger, again, at a time when these little hands have not had enough time to play. And therefore they're not developed to the point where they're holding it correctly. So you're seeing these grasp patterns that are immature because a 2-year-old is going to hold anything you put in their hand like this, right? And so a lot of kind of what I talk about in the book and what I sort of feel as an occupational therapist is that those play opportunities need to be present and they need to be thoughtful about when they're provided. And that's why those sensory tables, tweezers, tongs, games that require kids to have to pick up their fingers, nuts and bolts, bead stringing, all of those tasks are so important because those are the play opportunities. And there's only a short period of time now where kids actually get them for them to develop those skills. Because, then they go to school, and when they should be kind of practicing writing and learning, kindergarten-ish, now it's, they're expecting kids to come into kindergarten being able to write their name, got to write a sentence halfway through kindergarten. And that was not 25 years ago when I started this, that wasn't even close to being the norm. It was write your first name and last name, actually not even write, copy your first and last name from a name tag at the end of kindergarten in capital letters. Like they didn't even teach how to write lowercase letters until first grade. So now we have these kids that are coming into school, the academics are getting harder younger. We're transitioning them to laptops. I think my son, who's 15 now, got his first laptop when he was in the second grade. And so now these kids are, they're not spending enough time doing the writing. They're jumping more into the technology. And because of how invested and excited and motivated they happen to be by tech, they're playing less, and they're not like, I feel like by, unfortunately, 7 or 8, the toys are gone, and they're replaced a lot by video games, and tablets. So I think it's so important to just be intentional when kids are younger about the kinds of play experiences they have, the environments that they're playing in. And, even as a working parent myself, it's hard. It's hard to know which toys to buy. It's hard to, know what activities to do. And so that's what I tried to focus on a lot in the book was, if you don't have the option to go to a store right then what can you find in your kitchen drawer? What can you get in the bathroom? Can you get, cotton balls and Q-tips and, all sorts of things in the house that you can create your own activities that aren't super complicated, but are still giving kids opportunities to develop those skills.
When my daughter was probably a year and a half or two, I think her favorite things to play with were a box of lids that my mom had saved from shaving cream cans, and she just had all these plastic lids and shaving cream. We would just put shaving cream in a in a bowl or something, and she would just that would keep her busy for such a long time. And yeah, you're right. You don't see that much play like that anymore. What is driving that push in schools? Is it parents who just want to know that their 3-year-old is on the Harvard track and they want academics earlier? Is that what's pushing that?
I think there's some of that. A lot of times I've worked with kids for so long, and a lot of my work has been in the schools, but also directly working with kids and parents in their homes, right? And so I tend to find like it's what parents identify with, knowing the colors, knowing the letters, and then it becomes it's like, oh, tell them what color that is. Oh, what letter is that? What letter is that? And so it's more so about like proving to other people that kids are kind of on the right track if they know if those early academic skills are kind of developing. So I think some of it is that. I think education wise, there's a lot that schools are trying to fit in, and they are just trying to do it younger and younger. And development, in my experience, has not changed. But for whatever reason, many kids are actually able to perform. They're doing it. And so then it becomes skewed, right? Because other kids have the option they're doing it. So why doesn't that child over there do it? When in reality, I might come in and work with that one child that's struggling. But at the end of the day, when we do testing and I make observations and we compare that child to what's happening in the developmental norm, they're fine. So some of it is expectation. I think a lot of schools are trying to prove to parents that that's their value add, right? Like, you're paying all this money to come to my preschool and daycare, and we're going to teach them all these things that are really hard for you to do as a parent. And kids performing it is kind of the the proof that that they're learning.
Well, and with parents driven so much by social media and wanting something we can put on Instagram and being able to boast about our child doing something earlier or better or being advanced, that's a powerful draw too. One of the things you talk about in the book are sort of checklists about, by this age you should be seeing these your child should be able to do this or that. By this age, you should see this. So people can kind of gauge where their child is, look for something that might be concerning if their child isn't doing that. But on the other hand, we see a lot more people these days being willing to embrace this concept that children develop at different rates. They're individuals. Some kids, maybe they're reading at 7. Some kids maybe not until 9. And that kind of variation there is okay. But with fine motor development, you said earlier, there is really a critical window that things have to happen, or maybe they just can't ever get there as well as they could if they did it when the brain was in that period of development.
Basically, yes, the fine motor skills are important because the academics get hard really quick. And that, once kids enter school, if they're not coming in with a pencil grip that's moving in the right direction, with the ability to hold their scissors and kind of already cut, once they get into class, like all those deliverables are there, right? Kindergarten is all about color cut glue, and if you're not performing those skills at that age, then how are you proving that you understand the content in terms of what needs to be done in the classroom? So, yeah, for sure. And I think fine motor skills are kind of one of the easiest skills that you as a parent or a teacher have the ability to influence, because kids aren't going to fight you with certain toys if you put them out on the table, but the moment you pull out that pencil and those scissors, they're like, I don't really want to do that. And so the other piece of it is there are ways to work on those same skills without actually having to pick up a pencil, without actually really having to cut with paper, and so a lot of what I focused on over the years is finding those toys and tools and activities that are simulated to work a lot on those same skills, so that when the time's right and that pencil shows up or those scissors show up, kids are in a place where they can learn that skill or perform it pretty, even if they're not totally familiar with it, they're able to show those prerequisite skills that they can pick it up a little bit faster. Otherwise, they get frustrated. They're in class, their kid next to them is using the scissors, they're done. When you're done, you can go play, right? And now I can't get done and I can't go play because I can't get I don't have the skills to be able to get these tasks done.
As parents, we're always thinking about how can I help my child succeed? What can I do to give them an advantage and be prepared for school? And that's one thing you really highlight in the book is you have lists of toys kind of in every area for every developmental stage that you recommend. And there are so many things out there. Every toy seems to say that it's educational or that it build some certain skill, but talk about a little bit how you selected those toys and how useful that is for a parent or anyone looking to buy something for a child.
Yeah. So as an occupational therapist, right, my whole job is teaching these skills through play. And so we sort of end up in the toy industry, in the toy aisles very frequently, at least I did, because, kids are motivated by doing things that are fun, right? Like I said before, if I pulled out a pencil and was like, we're going to write your name, like they don't really want to do that, right? So when I'm working with kids for 30 minutes to an hour, I have to have like a little bag of tricks of things that I know that they're going to like, that are motivating to them, that help us get that job done a little bit faster. So I've always had this collection of toys that have kind of just piled up like in my office, in the closet. And then about actually 15 years ago, I started actually taking those toys to social media. So I was writing content reviews and doing YouTube videos and kind of sharing what I liked about toys and games from a therapy mindset with people online. And so aside from shopping in the toy aisle, I then found myself as a media representative in the toy aisle and the toy industry, because companies thought, they're like, wow, this is a really unique perspective, right? Like you look at toys so differently in a way that, yes, it's the toy itself can be educational, but a lot of what we're doing as OTs is I can make lots of toys educational just in the way it's presented or the activity that we create. So this book for me actually is a huge like combination of all of my experience as an OT, the last 15 years that I've spent working directly with toy companies here in the United States and in Europe. I'm actually part of a panel in Europe where I vote for the toy of the year. I actually just finished rating all those toys yesterday. So I look at those toys, I evaluate them, and I provide feedback to them so that they can pick some of the best educational toys based on categories across the world, right? So I've seen toys everywhere, toys from different cultures. And so for me, if those companies that are highlighted in that book, those toys that are listed out very specifically are really customized, like individual preferences of things that I have used, that I know that kids enjoy. And so it's not, I didn't just go to Amazon or whatever and say, show me these toys and come up with a list based on something I had never seen. It's all the years of experience that I've had and all my knowledge put together to really curate some lists of toys and games that I think are top notch.
And you told me, we've talked a little bit about this. Nobody paid you to mention certain toys in the book. You didn't have any kind of endorsements. These are really toys that you have selected based on your own criteria as a therapist. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that you are known as the Toy Queen, which sounds like the most fun job ever. So you get to go to these toy conventions and see the latest innovations. What are you seeing as far as trends? I mean, as a parent, I would say everything, like we've discussed, has gotten more electronic, more on screens, but they're coming up with new things. What are some toys you're seeing that excite you that you can talk about without divulging industry secrets?
A lot of what I get drawn to are actually like games, some of the games for younger kids. The classics are still there. You do see a lot of the Montessori like wooden type toys now, the things that you can buy that are going to last through, if you choose to have multiple children or pass down from generation to generation. I think I'm definitely seeing a lot of companies that are really committed to things like sustainability, creating toys from products that are good for the environment, that will last for a longer period of time, so that if you have multiple children, you can buy it once, use it for multiple children, or pass it down from one generation to the next. I think there's a lot of sensory related toys. We're seeing a huge, or at least in the past like 5 or 6 years, we've seen a huge increase in kind of that fidget toy market. And I'm okay with that. I think there's, as long as that they're safe. Sometimes I find like in that aisle, you get toys that are maybe made necessarily from like not as many reputable companies, right? They could be, for kids that put things in their mouth, they could be choking hazards and whatnot. But for fidget toys that are created by really good companies with really good safety practices, it's really brought, I think, a lot of positive light on neurodiversity and how people think and how they function, and that it's okay that we need to fidget in order to learn. And so we're seeing that shift kind of in the toy industry. I'm also seeing a shift in terms of like, older people still playing, right? You have adults who are asking for Lego sets for Christmas. Like that's a real thing, so we're kind of seeing it kind of come back, in 15, 20 years, with there's still a focus on adults having the opportunity to play too.
I love Legos, and I don't necessarily want to make a fire truck. Like maybe I want. That's why you see the architecture ones and the ones that are more for adults. I think it's really neat.
Yeah, I used to. I haven't. I don't have it all finished yet, but I have those Lego flowers. Actually, they're supposed to replace the flowers that are behind me right now. But they're beautiful. They're gorgeous, and I'm like, they're such a statement piece. And I'm like, I need to get that project done.
You've talked a lot about the toys that parents can buy, the things that we can find, the innovations you're seeing in the toy market. But this is not something that has to cost a lot of money. I was talking about my daughter playing with shaving cream lids and things like that. So there is a lot that families can do in the home if they're not able to buy a lot of expensive toys.
Absolutely. I think the hard part is you don't have to spend a lot of money. The tricky part is trying to figure out what exactly to do with those things so that you can feel like you're providing a valuable experience. I think in some ways as adults, we're also used to a lot more bells and whistles. We know we have a lot more experience, right? So some of what drives it is what interests us more so than what interests kids. And kids they're not picky, right? Like you were saying about your daughter, like they just want to pull open a drawer and empty it and then put everything back in and then empty it out again. Or they want to take that pot and that wooden spoon and they want to bang away, and they're totally happy and fine with those play experiences. So one of my favorite recommendations actually that's in the book too is, AI, for better or for worse, has really given us some opportunities to come up with activities. So like, yes, I've got some activities in there. If you're the kind of person who has different things at home that's, different on your list of what you have in front of you for that moment, like go to AI. Hey, give me an activity that I can do with Q-tips and shaving cream and a plate, and see what comes up. I mean, if you're stuck, it's definitely something, something to help you move forward in the right direction. And maybe you modify what that gives you as a suggestion. But, there's lots of tools and tips and social media that can sort of help bridge that gap if you're not feeling confident in the types of activities that you're offering. So yeah, no, there's kitchen drawers are my favorite. I love like tongs and tweezers and Swedish meatballers and ice cube trays. And like, there's just so much good stuff at home that you probably didn't even realize you had.
I'm really curious. It might be hard to narrow down just one, but what is your favorite toy? What is the thing that you most like to play with?
I don't know if I can answer that in one item.
Okay, name a few.
As a therapist, the kinds of toys that I use like throughout the day, those are like specifically what I might use. Okay, like what I would carry. I always say like in the trunk of my car, because my trunk is basically like a mobile toy store because I move from one location to another. I always have some kind of a container of like unique, and they're not even really toys, crayons, markers. There's so many cool options now of crayons, some that look like rocks, there's markers that are round, there's all sorts of different kinds of arts and crafts materials for me that that are exciting to kids rather than just what they're typically used to. And sometimes even just kind of getting the crayons that look a little bit different are motivating in itself because it doesn't feel the same. So I always have a container of interesting like markers and crayons. I have different kinds of scissors. I have usually learning resources, and I talk a lot about this actually particular toy in the book. It's like a sorting pie. So it's like a pie with different colors at the bottom, and comes with all these different pieces of like fruit that are different colors and tweezers. So you can use your tweezers to sort them by color. But then there's also an opportunity there's numbers, so you can swap out what's at the bottom of the tray so that you can make the skill either easier or more difficult. And so I'll often like use a toy like that to work on fine motor skills, but there's some other element to it where I might hide, 5 of those pieces somewhere in the living room, and you have to take your tweezers or tongs and you have to go find it, pick it up, and then carry it back. So I think that's kind of, yeah, there's like specific toys that are awesome, but I think for OTs, or at least how I play, it doesn't have to just be the actual toy. It's how do you level it up or level it down to kind of meet the needs of the child where they're at in that moment, to keep them engaged. So I, kind of alluded to it before, I can make toys and make experiences out of some basic items.
You do that in the book too. You'll mention an activity or a toy and you'll say, make it harder, make it easier. So you can modify it based on the specific needs or skills of the child that the person is working with, which I found really handy as well.
And that's kind of the secret sauce of what occupational therapy is. We're trained, yes, to help kids improve their skills. But if they're not successful, then the other part of our training is task modification. What do we do to make it either easier or more difficult or more motivating, so that if we can't quite get exactly to that skill that we want to get to in that moment, what little baby step do we need to take? Or how do we modify how we present that toy? Or do I swap out a different piece? Or what do I need? I always know what the end goal is. The end goal is, yes, I want to see this perfect little grip, but how do we make little adjustments along the way to get to that point if a child isn't necessarily ready to just, do an activity? Because a lot of it is time. It takes time.
So, if people are listening today, maybe they're a teacher with some students in their class, maybe it's a parent or a grandparent who's got a young kiddo who's just struggling. Maybe they've been told that they're behind or they don't have the grip that they should have. Uh, you've got a lot of techniques and ideas in your book to help us help the kids that we care about in our lives. But what are some takeaways or advice that you might have for those folks who are watching a kiddo struggle and just want to help them be successful?
Yeah, for sure. If you have an inkling that you think that something isn't right, then go to the developmental checklist, right? Look for those ages. I have them listed in the book. The CDC has an app. There are standardized things that you can do based upon age to kind of get a general sense of, if something doesn't feel right, then generally, intuition is very powerful. And so I think if anybody hasn't told you, but you have an inkling of it, definitely do a little research, and see based on age whether those skills are kind of fitting within that same age range. And know that again, it is an expected range, and some of those ranges can vary quite dramatically in terms of performance. But you'll get a general idea of kind of where you think that child is performing. Pediatricians are often very helpful in this kind of situation because a lot of the next steps for referral really just depends on how old the child is. There's lots of there's early intervention programs for kids that are under the age of 3 that generally come at no cost, or sliding scale fees for families depending upon what state they live in, or what program they're in, or what insurance they have or don't have. And so, but those early intervention programs, you can often get referred to from a pediatrician. You also, because a pediatrician's also another good check, right? Like if you have concerns, let me schedule a doctor's appointment. Let me ask the doctor. They might not know all of the like exact developmental milestones, but they also hear a lot of stories, and they know that the community places that are in their area, they may be able to help you with that referral, even if it's just locating the phone number to call of a place. And then get an evaluation. It's for OT especially. I know it's scary and it's stressful to have your child evaluated, but I think as kind of holistically as a profession, people are generally very friendly. Everything that we do for kids at this age especially is all play based. So we're not doctors, we don't come in lab coats, we don't give shots. So I usually carry a bag of toys, which is really exciting for many kids. So it's less stressful for them than it probably will be for you as a parent. But find somebody who can make observations or do a standardized test to really give you the definitive answer on, do they need help or not? Because ideally, and best practice scenario is that the faster that we get kids help, the faster they develop, the shorter the delay is, and the easier it is for them as things get harder, like we talked about before, for them to just be ready for those more difficult concepts. So I would say don't be afraid of getting an evaluation. And your private health insurance, if you have private health insurance or public health insurance, call those companies, say, hey, I have a concern, I need to find an occupational therapist, and see if they can identify places. The second piece of it would be the public school district for kids who are over the age of 3. The public school system is responsible to also support kids with therapy. So it could be speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy, could be additional opportunities to go to a special education preschool. So the difference is that when kids go to the school district, they have to prove that their fine motor delay would impact their academics. So that's where the pencil grip and the scissor grasp and all those things are even a little bit more important, because to get services through the school, which are free, they have to be able to coordinate that delay to something academically focused. If it's they're able to write their letters, but they can't tie their shoes, that's when the health insurance route is generally a better option. But for sure, a lot of parents have told me over the years that, we're the club that nobody wants to belong to, but we are the best club to get into once you really know kind of the amount of support and help that we can offer kids as they grow.
And then you can see your child blossom and shine and feel confident, and that's what every parent wants. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Early Childhood Chapters podcast. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Keriann Wilmot and gained new insights in supporting children's fine motor development. If you'd like to learn more about Keri's work or buy a copy of her book, Fine Motor Foundations, Tools and Techniques for Tiny Hands, be sure to check out the show notes for all the details. As always, I appreciate you spending your time with us and being part of this community dedicated to nurturing young learners. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Until next time, take care and keep fostering those little hands and big imaginations.